I never set out to learn the truth about the Sinclairs. Their name wasn't carved into any marble monuments, nor did their family tree hang proudly in museums. If you search history books, you'll find little more than a polite footnote. Sinclair family, landowners, Albemarle County, Virginia, circa early 1800s. But outside of history's clean margins, their name lives differently. It's muttered in gas stations after midnight. It's whispered by hunters who swear they've seen fire burning in the ruins, though no one lives there. And if you stop in the wrong diner on the wrong back road, you might hear an old voice lean in and say, "Don't go near the white columns." The Sinclairs didn't earn their gold with sweat. They earned it with blood. That's how the story reached me. And against every instinct I had, I went looking. The first time I saw the Sinclair property, it was by accident. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe the road wanted me there. The asphalt thinned into dirt, then gravel, crunching under my tires like dry bones. The trees overhead bent too close, their branches clawing at each other, making a tunnel that seemed less like forest and more like a throat. The air grew heavy, sweet with rot, like fruit left to melt in the sun. A copper tang rode the breeze, sharp enough that I licked my teeth to check for blood. The hairs on my arms stood up before the house even came into view. And then, there it was. 4 white columns rose out of the earth, stubborn, cracked, but still tall as soldiers. Behind them, the house sagged into itself. The roof half collapsed, the windows blind and gaping, ivy climbing the brick like veins. The door hung closed, though the hinges were rusted to nothing. It shouldn't have been standing still. But it was, waiting. The porch moaned when I stepped onto it. The boards bent like old men's backs, complaining with every footfall. I pressed a palm against the door, expecting splinters, but instead I felt warmth, not living warmth. Oily warmth, like the way skin feels after fire. The door opened for me. Not swung, not creaked, slid. A silent invitation into the dark. The air inside was cooler, unnaturally so. Dust drifted in my flashlight beam like snowflakes caught in slow motion. The hallway stretched long and lean, paper peeling from the walls in curls, nails jutting out where portraits once hung. I thought of all the faces that had been erased, all the eyes that no longer watched. Somewhere deeper in the house, I heard it, scratching, small, deliberate, like fingernails dragging slowly across plaster. I froze. Every instinct screamed animal, a raccoon, a rat. But then I heard it again, softer this time, as if whoever or whatever it was didn't want me to leave. To the right, a door waited. The key still sat in its hole, iron thick and black, the kind that looks older than memory. I turned it. Something turned me. The door side open onto a study. Here time had been kinder. A desk stood stout in the center, books hunched on sagging shelves, a hearth capped with a mirror too suited to reflect. My light swept across the room and froze. On the desk lay a diary. The leather had rotted at the edges, but the pages inside seemed untouched, their ink waiting patiently for an audience. I flipped it open. The first words were as sharp as if they'd been written that morning. September 3rd, 1817. There are voices in the walls when Father prays. They speak in a throat older than ours. I think they are teaching him to say their names back. The handwriting was careful. A young woman's hand. I whispered the name that rose to my mind without permission. Eleanor. The room changed when I said it. The mirror over the hearth groaned, its soot shifting just enough to reflect a sliver of something pale behind me. I spun. Nothing, just the desk. The books. The diary opened like a wound. I should have left. I didn't. The diary continued, each entry tightening the air around me. September 6th, 1817. Samuel walks the halls at night. He stops at the cellar door and listens. Sometimes he speaks, but not in words I know. His eyes are not his eyes when the moon is high. September 12th, 1817. Mother has stopped attending church. She says God does not hear this house. Last night she prayed, but the words were jagged, not her own. When she finished, her smile did not belong to her. I turned the pages too quickly, hands shaking, the leather snapping in protest. One fragment stopped me cold. September 19th, 1817. Thomas found Father's box. He knows now. The cost is greater than he understands. What box? The room seemed to pulse with that question. My flashlight dimmed as though the walls were drinking its glow. A cold draft swept through, and with it came a smell, iron and wet earth. From the hallway, the scratching began again, louder, closer. I snapped the diary shut and stepped back into the hall. The sound wasn't coming from the walls this time, it was from upstairs. Against every rational instinct, I climbed. The stairs sagged underfoot. Halfway up, a groan cracked through the house, as if the weight of my body was too much for bones this old. But the scratching didn't stop. It led me to a bedroom door. Half rotted, splintered. I pushed it open and nearly gagged. The air was thick, sour with mold and something sweeter beneath it. Sickly, copper-sweet, like blood dried for centuries. Against the far wall, plaster had split. A dark line cut the wallpaper, widening into a crack that spidered downward. The scratching came from there. I pressed my ear to the wall. The sound stopped. Then, 3 hard knocks. From the inside, the plaster bulged, then cracked apart, collapsing in chunks to the floor. Behind it was not emptiness, but brickwork closing off a narrow alcove. Something wrapped in cloth slumped inside, crumbling with age. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe the house wanted me to. My fingers brushed the fabric and it fell away like ash. What lay inside was not an object. It was not even a secret. It was an infant's skeleton, tiny, perfectly preserved, symbols carved into its skull, jagged lines running like rivers across bone. The scratching began again, not from the wall now, but from inside the alcove. The bones shifted. I stumbled back, hitting the doorframe. My light flickered, darting across the room. The tiny skull seemed to smile, though its jaw didn't move. Dust stirred, lifting as if something exhaled from the bricks, and then, just as I turned to flee, I heard her voice. Not from the diary. Not from memory. From right behind me, a whisper warm against my ear. It was not my mother's smile. The flashlight died. The room went black. And the Sinclair story had only begun. When the flashlight died, I thought the house would swallow me whole. But the light returned, faint, trembling, and the alcove was empty. The infant's bones were gone. Only the carved brick remained, scarred with symbols that seemed to crawl if I stared too long. I fled the room, but I wasn't free. I was only deeper. And soon I would learn what the Sinclairs endured after that first discovery. Eleanor's diary picks up again, but her entries change. Shorter, more frantic. Like she wrote in stolen seconds. September 26, 1817, 11:47 p.m. The scratching woke us. Father told us not to listen, but it is louder every night. Tonight, I heard a baby crying inside the wall. I am not mad. I swear to God, I am not mad. September 27, 1817, 3:02 a.m. Samuel is gone from his bed again. He stands by the cellar door whispering to someone I cannot see. He does not hear me when I call his name. By this time, servants had begun to vanish. Not all at once. One each night. Beds stripped. Belongings untouched. Their wages are still on the table. No farewells. Neighbors began whispering that the Sinclair estate was cursed. Some claimed to hear bells tolling at impossible hours. Others swore smoke rose from the chimney, even though no fire had burned there for days. A surviving letter from Reverend Jameson describes a visit he made to the estate. October 1st, 1817. I was called to speak with Margaret Sinclair. Her complexion was pale as wax, her pupils wide, her smile stretched too far. She spoke softly, asking if he could be forgiven for his hunger. When I pressed who she meant, she laughed until she wept. I left her room disturbed, and as I departed the house, I heard footsteps above me, heavy and deliberate. Yet Thomas assured me we were the only souls inside. That same night, Eliza Carter, the housemaid who once wrote about the whispering study, vanished. Her notebook was found later, wedged between floorboards near the kitchen hearth. The final entry read October 1st, 1817, 11:19 p.m. Something walks the halls. It is not Mr. Sinclair, though it wears his shadow. October 3rd, 1817. Witnesses in town claimed to see flickering lights moving through the upper windows of the manor. Not lanterns, not candles. Fire. Small, controlled, roaming. One merchant swore he saw the silhouette of a figure burning inside without screaming. Inside the diary, Eleanor wrote, "Father has stopped speaking to us. His lips move, but his words are not English." Thomas follows him, always pale, always afraid. Last night the lights danced in my room, though no candle was lit. They moved across the ceiling like hands searching. The strange lights grew frequent. Some nights, neighbors swore they saw dozens of them, circling the columns outside like fireflies made of flame. On October 7th, 1817, another servant went missing. His name was Joseph, a stable hand. A week later, his body was discovered in the creek half a mile from the estate. His chest was marked with the same symbols carved into the infant's skull. The coroner noted, "There is no evidence of drowning. The lungs are dry. The cause of death is blood loss, though no wound explains the volume missing." That was the first official record, the first undeniable proof that something was very wrong. By mid-October, the Sinclairs had become pariahs. Farmers refused to trade with them. Churchgoers crossed themselves when their carriage passed. Children dared each other to touch the estate's iron gate, claiming it burned the skin like a hot stove. One neighbor, Henry Dawson, later gave testimony in a private journal, October 10th, 1817. "I was woken near dawn by screams carrying across the fields. I thought at first it was a fox taken by hounds, but the pitch was wrong, higher human. When I rose, I saw Thomas Sinclair standing in his window, his hand pressed against the glass. Behind him, I swear I saw another face, smaller, gray, watching." October 12th, 1817, 2:16 a.m. Eleanor's diary. "Samuel is missing. Father says he has gone to the woods for prayer. But I saw the cellar door open and his footprints go downward. He has not returned. Mother will not weep. She says he is blessed." That morning, 2 hunters claimed to see a boy wandering barefoot near the tree line. His skin was pale as moonlight, his eyes black. When they called to him, he vanished, simply blinked out of sight like smoke. The hunters refused to enter the woods again. Eleanor wrote furiously after that night. Her words were jagged, ink-blotched, hands shaking. October 13th, 1817, 11:47 p.m. I heard him again. "Samuel." He called my name from the cellar. When I went down, the door shut behind me. I swear on my soul I heard dozens of voices chanting. I could not see them, but they surrounded me in the dark. When I screamed, the lights flickered and I saw Father standing at the bottom stair, his face not his face. His smile was too wide. His eyes were someone else's eyes. She stopped writing for 2 days after that. Reverend Jameson, against warnings, returned on October 15th. His notes survive. The air grew colder the nearer I approached. The earth felt damp, though there had been no rain. Inside, I found Thomas sitting alone in the dining hall. He muttered numbers under his breath, 7, 9, 13, 7, 9, 13. When I asked what they meant, he said, "They are the cost." I asked where his mother and father were. He looked upward toward the ceiling and whispered, "Feeding." The Reverend left before nightfall, refusing to return. The final entry in Eleanor's diary for that month is the most chilling, October 17th, 1817, 12:04 a.m. I woke to footsteps in my room. I thought it was Thomas, but the figure was taller, broader. It stood by my bed and I smelled earth, wet, rotten, as if it had just risen from the ground. When I reached for the candle, the flame lit on its own. In the glow I saw the face. It was Samuel, my brother, but his eyes were gone, 2 hollow wounds where they should be. He opened his mouth and soil poured out. Her entry ends there. Ink dragged into a line as if the pen was ripped away. That same night, neighbors swore they saw fire blazing from the manor windows. But when they ran to help, the flames vanished. The house stood silent, cold, and black. 1 week later, another disappearance. This time not a servant. It was Eleanor herself. Her bed was found empty, sheets damp with soil, her diary closed on the desk as if carefully placed. A single phrase was scrawled across the last page in a hand that did not match hers. "She belongs to us now." And from that moment, the Sinclairs were no longer just whispering about. They were feared. By October's end, Eleanor was gone. The townsfolk whispered she had eloped, run from the sickness in her bloodline. But those who lived closest to the estate knew better. They had heard her cries echoing from the woods, long after her bed went cold. And though the Sinclairs closed their shutters and barred their doors, what they tried to bury could not be hidden forever. Because in their house, behind walls, beneath floors, their secrets were rotting and waiting to be found. It was Thomas who uncovered the first proof. His letters, found much later in an attic trunk, tell the story. October 22nd, 1817, 2:11 a.m. I cannot sleep. The cellar whispers to me as it once whispered to Samuel. I hear him call from the dark. Tonight I searched for Father's study. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a second diary, not Eleanor's. High, bound in black leather, stiff with age. Its pages stink of iron. I believe this is the true record of our family. Inside Charles Sinclair's journal, Thomas found the origin of their curse. The entries stretch back to 1799 when Charles inherited the land. The first entry read, I have struck an arrangement. The soil here is barren, but he has promised bounty. He requires only devotion and tribute. A covenant of blood. In return, my line will be unbroken, our wealth secure. The cost is a drop for a river of gold. The journal detailed rituals, offerings buried at the roots of the oldest oak, blood spilled at midnight, incantations in a language no scholar could trace. And then there was the box. Thomas wrote of a night when he followed his father to the cellar. He hid in the shadows as Charles unlocked a wooden chest bound with iron. Inside lay relics that should never have survived. A chalice, its rim caked with dark residue. Small figures carved from bone, smoothed by too many hands. A strip of parchment inked in Latin, the words translating roughly to, what is gold without flesh? What is power without sacrifice? But what struck Thomas most was the smell. Not mold, not rot, something coppery, metallic, unmistakable, blood. Local reports confirmed strange disturbances during this time. A constable named Jonathan Hales filed a log, October 25, 1817. Smoke was sighted rising from the Sinclair property. Upon arrival, no fire could be located. The residents were uncooperative. They appeared pale, gaunt, and unwilling to answer questions. A foul odor emanated from the cellar door, but I was refused entry. Recommendation: further inspection required. That inspection never came. Hales disappeared 2 nights later. His body was never recovered. His logbook was found abandoned on the road half a mile from the estate. Thomas, determined to uncover more, pressed deeper. In one letter, he describes following hollow sounds along the cellar wall, October 28, 1817, 1:44 a.m. I struck the stone with a hammer and it rang hollow. Behind the bricks, I found a door, small, iron, marked with the same symbols carved into Samuel's skin. It was locked, but the key hung nearby as if waiting. When I opened it, a narrow passage stretched into the earth. The air was wet and hot, and I swear I heard chanting from below. What Thomas found inside that hidden room would change the narrative forever. At the end of the passage sat an altar. Not ornate, not holy. A slab of stone slick with centuries of use. Around it, the remains of animals, horses, cattle, dogs, all sacrificed. But among them were bones too small, too human, and on the wall above the altar, etched deep into the rock, a symbol of a hand clutching a chain of coins, the fingers sharpened into claws. Beneath it was written in jagged script, worth more than gold. One servant girl, who escaped and later testified anonymously, gave this account. I saw them in the cellar, Mr. Sinclair, Mrs. Sinclair, and Thomas. They stood around the stone. The boy Samuel lay upon it, though his chest rose and fell. They cut his palm and bled him into the cup. They drank. His eyes opened, black as tar, and he laughed, though his mouth did not move. Her account was dismissed as hysteria, but it matches too well with Thomas's writings to be ignored. Records from Albemarle County during this period show unexplained prosperity. Despite poor harvests across Virginia, the Sinclair plantation thrived. Their tobacco fields yielded double the average. Their wealth expanded even as neighbors lost land. But with each gain, more disappearances were logged. Servants vanished. Drifters went missing near the estate. Even local children were reported gone, though their cases were quietly closed. It seemed the covenant's price was being paid. The greatest mystery remained Eleanor. Thomas's later entries suggest she discovered the truth as well. October 29, 1817, 3:09 a.m. I heard her voice last night. Eleanor, calling from beyond the cellar door. But when I entered, I saw her not as she was. Her eyes shone like mirrors, her skin pale as wax. She said, "Join us, Thomas. There is no fear in gold." When I tried to flee, her laughter followed me up the stairs. This was the last entry in Thomas's letters. What becomes clear from these records is simple and horrifying. The Sinclairs made a blood covenant to ensure their dynasty's survival. Gold flowed, land prospered, but the cost was flesh, not once, not twice, continuously. The infant bones in the alcove were not an accident. They were tribute. Samuel's transformation was not illness. It was an inheritance. Eleanor's disappearance was not a flight. It was an induction. The final piece of evidence comes not from the family, but from a neighbor named Abigail Moore, who claimed to see the estate one last time before the tragedy struck. October 31st, 1817. I passed by at dusk. The windows all blazed with light, though the sun was setting behind. I saw figures in every pane, pale and smiling, their mouths moving as one. And in the center window, Margaret Sinclair lifted her hand. She held the chalice. The liquid inside was thick, black, and steaming. After that night, the Sinclairs were never seen alive again. But the house endured. What Thomas uncovered was only the beginning. Because once secrets are unearthed, they cannot be buried again. And the covenant the Sinclairs made was not a tale to be read and forgotten. It was a chain. A debt, a hunger, and debts do not disappear. They collect. I didn't leave the house after I found the bones. That would have been the sane choice, the living choice. But sanity is a door you walk past when something opens for you from the dark. Once you step through, you don't turn around. You keep going because some rooms can only be exited by crossing all the way to the other side. I went back to the study with Eleanor's diary under my arm. The floor remembered the weight of me. It sighed, then stilled. The air in that room never felt dead. It felt attentive, like a theater waiting for actors. I lit a match, pressed it to a guttered candle I'd found on the mantel. The flame stuttered, chose to live, then steadied. In that thin light, the mirror over the hearth shed its soot like breath fog, exposing a faint reflection of the desk, the doorway, me. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw someone standing at a pace behind my shoulder. Pale, hair pinned up, throat bruised by centuries of silence. When I turned, there was only the doorway. The diary fell open to where I'd left it. Another page had curled loose, as if the house had turned it for me. October 31st, 1817, 11:42 p.m. They have assembled below. Father carries the chalice. Mother does not blink. He says tonight is the blessing and we shall be safe. I do not feel safe. I feel watched by a mouth. A blot of ink dotted the margin, heartbeat-shaped. My own pulse matched it. I flipped ahead, October 31st, 1817, 11:58 p.m. I heard Samuel humming in the walls again. The same tune as before, but wrong now, thinner, colder. There is a door in the cellar none of us made. It opened without a key. The passage breathes. Then, scrawled across the bottom, if I don't write again, it is because I am with them. My match died, and the candle struggled, sank, and went out. The mirror swallowed itself in soot. Darkness fell, complete and soft, like a hand over the eyes. From somewhere below, a sound rose, a single, deliberate footstep on the cellar stairs. I froze. The house settled around me like muscle. Another step. And then another. Slow, patient. Whoever it was wanted me to hear. I slipped the diary under my jacket and moved into the hall. The staircase ahead fell into a black mouth. My phone flashlight wasn't much, but it was all I had left. It cut a narrow tunnel into the dark. Dust curled like breath. In that cone, I saw the edge of the banister, the first stair, and what looked like the print of a wet heel. Small, a child. The water, it wasn't water, had pooled glossy where it fell. I followed the prints down. The first flight gave way to a landing, then another smaller stair that twisted sharply left. The old wood complained under me, but not loudly. The house didn't want to wake itself yet. At the bottom, the cellar door stood open. Cold air slid out and coated my teeth. I tasted iron and damp stone. The smell wasn't just rot. Something sweet undercut it, molasses gone sour. The exact scent you get when blood meets soil and decides to stay. I stepped through. The cellar should have been a rectangle under the house. It wasn't. The first chamber sprawled into a series of low arches, bricks slick with a black-green sheen like algae. Bottles lay in drifts, their corks swollen, some burst. But to the right, beyond the arches, stood the door from Thomas's letter, small iron, tattooed with symbols. The key was there, hanging welcomingly like a tongue. It did not surprise me that the door was ajar. Beyond it, a passage sloped down, ribbed with roots. Lanterns wouldn't have been out of place, but there were none. Yet the dark wasn't total. A slow, warm pulse of glow seeped from below. The light of coals about to admit they are flame. My shoes sank into earth that wasn't earth anymore. It had drunk too much and remembered. The walls narrowed until my shoulders brushed cold brick. I had to angle sideways, and that's when I smelled smoke. Clean, dry, new. October 31st, 1817, 11:59 p.m. The thought arrived in my head the way a tide finds shore. I wasn't in that night, but I was next to it. The passage opened into the hidden room, a stone chamber veined with char, the altar in the center. It was not elaborate, just a slab of granite worn into a shallow bowl where too many offerings had emptied themselves. The old symbol, hand-clutching coins, loomed above in a relief gouge deep as a wound. A line of burned letters danced under my light, worth more than gold. That's when I heard the voices. Not from the room, but from the stone itself. Thin, layered, speaking in a language that pulled at my ears like a magnet pulling iron filings. Chanting without words. The syllables weren't meant to be heard by a mouth, only by what a mouth pretends it is. I edged closer to the altar. The bowl's stone was stained almost black. In the center, the darkness moved, too slowly to be alive, too steadily to be shadowed. When my light brushed it fully, I saw what it was, not liquid, not entirely. A sludge of ash and something else warm as it exhaled. The surface fluttered like a sleeping thing dreaming of running. I raised my light, and the room answered. They stepped out of the corners the way a photograph darkens into shape in a tray. First one figure, then three, then a family portrait assembled from air. A man in a coat too fine for the earth he stood on. A woman with her hair pinned back severely, smudged, smiling too wide. A boy with black pits where his eyes should have been, soil crusted in the hollows. And a young woman, Eleanor, her mouth small and fixed, as if holding back a scream that had never stopped crossing her throat. Thomas, the woman said, and her smile cracked into a stranger's grin. She was not talking to me, but her voice landed behind my ribs. I should have run. Instead, I spoke because I didn't want to be the only one breathing. Eleanor, I said. The name hurt the air. Read your words. Her head turned. In the motion, her hair came loose in a way only gravity could do. It made me believe her more than anything. He reads, she murmured as if to herself. It will make him easier. Behind them, the wall bulged and then relaxed, like a lung around a heart. The symbol above the altar brightened, not with light, but with attention. I felt looked at, appraised. From the passage behind me, the sound of a footstep. Heavy. Another, then a third. The air dropped 10 degrees. I didn't turn. Intuition told me not to show my throat. A man's voice spoke, so close the hairs in my ear bent. You found our room. I knew that voice. I had read it in the careful calm of a journal that had never used the word murder even when it meant it. Charles Sinclair, I don't want anything you had, I said. The sentence failed. What do you tell a dead man who sold his children to a mouth? You want the same thing as everyone who comes down, he said kindly. To believe there is a price that isn't yours. He walked into my light. His face was not monstrous. That was the worst part. He looked like a portrait meant to hang in a hallway you pass every day without thinking. Only his eyes were wrong, too bright, as if someone had polished them with a cloth dipped in hunger. Where is Thomas? I asked, because the living ask questions in the face of the unanswerable. Paying, he said, as all of us must. Footsteps above us, many. The kind of collective step that shakes a house when a crowd moves in time. The room warmed as if the floor remembered being in a fire and was pleased to be asked again. I saw it then, a seam around the altar, a thin line of unmortared brick. The slab was not just a table. It was a door. The boy, Samuel, tilted his head. Soil dribbled down his cheek in a delicate line. Hungry, he said in a voice edged with static as if distance was chewing the sound. Open, no, I said. I had already backed up without meaning to, my shoulder blades kissing the cold wall. Eleanor took one slow step closer. Her hands hung limp at her sides, but the fingers curled and uncurled, as if she had been holding something for too long and forgotten to drop it. Her face up close was beautiful in the way old photographs make beauty terrible. It is not your blood we want, she said. You are only a door. What? I started. The altar shuddered. A pop ran through the stone like a knuckle cracking. Ash fountained from the seam, drifting up and then down. settling on my tongue like the taste of a too-stale communion wafer. The seam widened. Heat wavered out, and with it rose a sound not made by the throat or mouth. A wet coin dropped into a bottomless purse again and again and again. "Don't," I whispered. To the family. To the house. To the thing waiting under stone. "Please," Charles smiled gently. "Worth more than gold," he said, as if he were blessing me. The seam ruptured. Light blew out of the gap, amber, syrup-thick, and the smell of old offerings rolled up like fog. The air shoved, and the lanternless room suddenly had shadows that did not belong to any of us. A shape climbed from the opening. Not a body. An economy. Its edges were hands that weren't hands, fingers that bent like melted tines, a mask of hammered coins where a face might be, each stamped with a different year that hadn't happened yet. The coins clicked softly as it turned its attention. When it faced me, something inside my ears popped. The pressure reminded me of airplane descent. The clicking became a murmur, a register drag in an empty store, items scanned, no customer present. I did the last stupid human thing left. I reached for a weapon. My hand found a rusted iron pry bar near the wall. It weighed like certainty. I swung. It passed through the coins and made a sound like a bell ringing underwater. The thing turned to weather the blow before it landed, as if it had always known I'd make it. The pry bar clanged off the altar and sparked. The spark bloomed like a seed, then became a flame the size of a thumb, then the size of a fist. It licked the ash, found something in it to love, and ran it. Fire took the seam first, then the lines in the stone, then the veins in the room. Flames crawled like writing. The family didn't move. Their faces lit from below became masks of delight. Heat shoved at my skin. It wasn't rage heat, more like longing heat. A campfire's demand that you gather closer or you will be alone forever. False hope arrived exactly as legends promised. The altar slammed shut. The flame sank, the coins clicking faded, the smell thinned. For 3 heartbeats the room looked like a cellar again. I swayed toward the passage, dizzy with relief. From the ceiling, a charred beam cracked. Another followed. The flame I'd seen retreating returned in a new place. Along the doorway, I needed to escape. It climbed the lintel and stitched itself across the top like a smile. Smoke rose. Thin first, then muscle thick. My throat tightened. I lunged for the opening, but the heat slapped me back. Skin blistered on my forearm. Behind me, Eleanor sighed, not in sadness. In recognition. "We thought it was over once, too," she said. "Help me," I coughed, a child's plea. Margaret smiled, the smile Eleanor had named. It did not reach her eyes. "We are helping," she said sweetly. "We are teaching you to value." The smoke squeezed the room into a fist. I dropped to the floor, the old advice of 1,000 school posters. Near the ground, the air was cooler but not kind. I belly crawled toward the passage, squinting for a gap in the fire stitch. My palm slid over a ridge in the dirt. Not stone, leather, a book. The black journal Charles had kept, edges burned but intact. It lay where someone had dropped it hastily, as if even the devoted forget their scriptures when the collection plate grows teeth. I shoved it under my shirt, the heat tattooing its corners into my skin. A crack like a gunshot ran the length of the wall above the altar. Through it, I heard a sound smaller than the house, smaller than the family, but larger than anything. A baby's thin, exhausted cry. It looped once, twice. Then something like a lullaby hummed underneath, the tune I'd heard in the walls, now played on strings made of names. "Thomas," Charles said, as if the sound reminded him of an errand. He turned away from me and toward a dark place at the back of the room I had not noticed. A doorway cut lower than the others, only high enough for a child to stoop and walk through. "It's time." A shadow moved in that doorway, small, hesitant. A boy stepped out with a hand over his eyes as if light hurt. For a moment I believed I had him, this last living piece of the family I could shepherd out. He lowered his hand. It wasn't Thomas. It was a face I'd seen in a reflection that wasn't mine. It was me, not older, not younger, just shifted sideways. My mouth on him twitched in a way mine doesn't. He looked at me with a softness I reserved only for glass. "Door," he said, and in his voice I heard road gravel grinding under tires, diner coffee steam, the old trucker's finger pointing. "Open." Something behind me grabbed my ankle. Not fingers, value. It closed like debt does. I kicked instinct, felt it tear at skin that wasn't skin anymore. The fire along the passage hiccuped, a breath catching. I surged into the gap, shoulder first, and forced myself through. Flame bit my back. The leather journal hissed. I stumbled into the corridor, coughing hard enough to black out the edges of the world. Behind me, someone laughed. Eleanor, maybe, or might not me. The sound rode the smoke and thinned it into a rag of sound. I crawled the passage on hands and knees, head down, counting steps. 7, 9, 13, 7. The numbers Thomas had muttered, the iron door at the top of the corridor waited open like grace. Beyond it, the cellar rippled with heat and the faint shine of new fire finding old wood. I lurched for the stairs. Halfway up, I looked back once. The altar room pulsed like a kiln. In the throat of its light, the coins thing rose again, taller now, its mask turning slowly to show me profile after profile, years marching across its face like kings no one voted for. Charles stood beside it, hand outstretched, and pressed something into its palm, a small, pale bundle. The shape of an answer you don't want. I collapsed on the main floor. The house above me had caught. The stairwell smoked, wallpaper blackened, the study's mirror crazed with heat fractures that webbed outward like frost. I crawled toward the front hall, the columns pale bones promising outdoor air. Each drag forward hurt less than the one before, a bad sign. My lungs burned. My head pulsed. The journal under my shirt dug into me like a brand, anchoring me to this world by pain. In the doorway, a figure blocked the night. Someone had come, a silhouette against a field of stars. "Help!" I wheezed. The figure stepped in, boots on char. A hand reached, gloved, steady, impossibly clean for this place. He bent close and I saw his face for the first time, the old trucker from the diner. He smiled, and in his mouth I saw a row of coins instead of teeth. They clicked once, twice, tallying me. "Took you long enough," he said, voice honeyed and even. "We've been waiting for the door to learn to open itself." I tried to push backward. My body failed the idea. Behind him, the fire found the railing and wrote its name up the staircase. Somewhere upstairs, the baby's thin cry began again, far away and close. The trucker, Charles, Samuel, none of these names fit him. Names are for people. He knelt, leaned in until his breath cooled my burned cheek. "Who's missing?" he asked pleasantly, as if we were playing a game around a campfire. "Count carefully." I turned my head toward the hall where I'd dropped the diary earlier, toward the place where I thought I might have left a piece of myself behind. My own voice answered from the study, soft and perfectly mine. "I am." Flame rolled across the ceiling. The front door slammed by itself, rattling the columns like a bell, and then the house inhaled. The house inhaled. And with it, so did I. Not by choice. My chest filled against my will, dragging in smoke and centuries of whispers. For a moment I thought I'd drown in the air. My body rattled, my vision seared white, then black, then something in between, a liminal film strip flickering too fast to belong to this world. When it let go, I collapsed to the floor. My palms left prints in ash that weren't my own size. Too small. Too many fingers. And then the truth began to speak. The journal under my shirt seared hot, branding me through the fabric. I pulled it out with trembling hands, its blackened leather slick with sweat and soot. Pages fluttered as if a wind passed through them. But there was no wind, only the will of something that wanted me to know. One page burned brighter than the rest. Words lifted from the parchment, smoke instead of ink. The covenant of 1799, signed in blood, sealed in silence. One drop for a river, one child for a fortune. One soul each generation pledged to the mouth of coin. In return, the dynasty will thrive, unbroken, untouchable, fed by gold greater than the earth's. Each line dug itself into me. The Sinclair's wealth wasn't just bought, it was borrowed. And borrowed wealth always comes with interest. The room quaked. From upstairs came the crash of beams splitting, followed by the laugh of something that had never learned how to laugh like a man. I staggered toward the door again, journal clutched like a shield. The trucker, the stranger with coin teeth, stood still, smiling. But behind him more shapes appeared. The family assembled like an old portrait come alive. Charles, Margaret, Samuel, Eleanor, and Thomas. For a moment my heart kicked with hope. He looked alive. His cheeks held color, his eyes not yet hollowed. He was breathing. But when he turned to face me, his mouth trembled, I tried to stop it, he said, voice cracking. I tried. But they said the covenant demanded new blood. A door, they called it. His eyes met mine. You, the words lanced me. Why me? You walked in. His lips twisted, almost pity. Once you read her diary, once you spoke her name, you weren't a visitor anymore. You were family. And the covenant. It takes family. I shook my head, stepping back. The fire hissed, closing off the retreat. The door behind me warped, its wood pulsing like flesh. You betrayed her, I spat. Eleanor, you gave her up. Thomas flinched, tears streaking his ash-caked face. I gave myself up too. Don't you see? There's no outside. Once it marks you, you belong. And if you fight it, it gets worse. The altar below groaned. Stone shrieked against stone. Then the slab split open again, not carefully this time, but hungrily, vomiting ash and flame. The thing rose higher, coins clattering across its face. Hands unfolding like ledgers kept too long. It loomed above the family, its mask turning, year after year, decade after decade, faces stamped into metal that hadn't yet been minted. The coins clicked in rhythm, then slowed into words. A voice of currency, hollow and absolute, the debt. The door, the blood, I clutched the journal. Its pages writhed, trying to open themselves, trying to show me the claws I had missed. Firelight carved the script onto the walls. The covenant ends only when the mouth of coin chooses a new line. The family must expand or perish entirely. My stomach dropped. A new line. The Sinclairs hadn't been keeping the curse alive. They had been keeping it contained. They were searching for someone else to bear it. Someone foolish enough to walk through the door, to open the diary, to speak the names aloud, and I had done all of it. The entity stretched, coins clattering. Its hand, 5 sharp digits ending in blades of gold, reached toward me. Heat pressed in waves, my skin blistering before the touch landed. Thomas stepped between us, shaking. Take me again. Take me instead. The coins turned, reflecting him. The voice of currency hummed. Already spent. Thomas collapsed, writhing. His skin blackened in patches, as if decades of dead interest were collected in a single moment. His screams became shrieks, then choked silence. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but a pile of ash shaped vaguely like a man. Eleanor smiled. One less sibling, she whispered. One more payment, I snapped. You think this thing cares about you? It will eat you like it ate him, like it ate your brother. Her eyes glowed silver. We are not eaten, she said. We are kept. The entity's hand lowered again. The heat pressed. My lungs screamed for air. I did the only thing left. I opened the journal to the burning page and read the words aloud. The script spilled from my lips in a language I didn't know, each syllable cutting like a blade across my tongue. The coins shivered, their clicking stuttering. For the first time, the entity paused. The family's faces twisted. Margaret hissed like boiling water. Charles bellowed a curse. Eleanor clutched her head, shrieking in 2 voices at once, hers and something older. The journal burned hotter, edges crumbling in my hands. But the more I read, the more the altar cracked, the more the entity faltered. The debt is blood. The debt is bound. The debt is broken when... The last word smeared in flame. I couldn't read it. The page collapsed into ash between my fingers. The entity roared. Not in anger, in laughter. The coins clattered like applause. The word was gone, and with it, the only chance at ending the covenant. And then I realized the truth. The missing word wasn't lost. It had never been written, because the covenant had no end. The escape clause was a trick, bait for whoever carried the journal. A way to make the next fool read it, to make the next bloodline begin. I was not here to end the curse. I was here to continue it. The entity leaned closer, its coin face gleaming, hot breath of molten wealth washing over me. The coins clinked in a single, final verdict. Door. My body locked. I couldn't breathe. My skin burned as if numbers were being written into it, tally marks carved into my bones. I felt myself splitting. Not dying, not yet. Changing. Charles placed a hand on my shoulder, gentle as a father. It is done, he said softly. You will keep us. I collapsed. The house groaned, beams falling, fire climbing. Somewhere behind me, the altar sealed shut, the thing sinking back into whatever vault it lived in. But its voice stayed inside me, ringing with every heartbeat. The family faded into smoke, their shapes dissolving, leaving me alone on the floor. Alone, except not. I could feel them all. Inside, waiting. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Distantly, I heard the first shouts of neighbors, men running toward the blaze. They'd find the ruins. They'd find me. And when they did, they'd ask what happened, and I would smile a smile that wasn't mine, and tell them the truth, that the Sinclair covenant was alive, that I was its new heir. As I staggered toward the door, the burning house collapsing around me, the journal disintegrated in my hands. Only one scrap remained, clinging stubbornly to my palm. It bore a single phrase, ink burned into the page like a brand. The door must open again. The walls behind me collapsed. The columns groaned. Fire licked the night, and as I stumbled into the fields coughing, broken, marked, I heard the cry of a newborn echo through the trees, but there was no child in sight. The Sinclair estate burned on the first night of November. In 17, neighbors swore the blaze lit the horizon red, though no thunderstorm had passed, no lightning had struck. The fire roared for hours, yet when dawn came, the columns still stood. White and charred, their shadows stretched like sentries across the ash. What they found inside would haunt Virginia for centuries. A sheriff's report survives, though most official accounts were misplaced in the years after. His handwriting, scrawled and uneven, testifies to what greeted him. Sheriff Elias Moore, November 1st, 1817. The Sinclair home lies in ruin. The roof collapsed inward, timbers smolder still. No bodies recovered whole, though bones are scattered among the debris. Many are too small to be adults. The smell of iron hangs in the air despite the ash. One man found alive wandering the fields, covered in burns but walking steady. He smiled when we asked his name. He did not give it. That one man was never identified in official records. Some whispered it was Thomas. Others claimed it was a drifter who had stumbled onto the wrong land. But old families in Albemarle will tell you differently. They say it was the covenant itself, wearing a new face. In the weeks following the fire, locals reported nightmares, shared, overlapping, uncanny in their similarity. They dreamed of a burning house, of a man with coin teeth, of children crying from behind cellar walls. Some woke with ash under their fingernails. Others found their hands blistered, as if they'd touched flame in their sleep. One farmer's wife, Abigail Moore, later confessed in a letter to her sister. He came to our door at dusk. A man, badly burned, carrying a book black as coal. He asked for water. I brought him inside, though my husband said no. His voice was gentle. Too gentle. He smiled, and for a moment I saw Eleanor in his eyes. I blinked and it was gone. When I returned with water, he was gone too. The chair where he sat was wet with blood. The book she described was never recovered. For decades after, no one lived on the Sinclair land. Farmers claimed their crops withered if planted too close. Hunters swore their dogs refused the property's edge, tails tucked, whining. Children dared each other to run up to the columns at night. Some returned pale, mute, unable to speak for days. By 1840, the estate was a landmark of dread. Locals called it the White Mouth, because the columns looked like teeth. Travelers avoided the road entirely, and yet strange prosperity seemed to cling to those who lingered near it. Merchants who took shortcuts across the fields returned with more coin than they left with, though they couldn't recall selling more goods. It was as if the covenant still paid its dividends, whether you wanted them or not. The ruin might have faded into folklore, if not for the records kept much later. In October 1923, deputies responded to reports of lights at the Sinclair grounds. Deputy Alan Reeves' report arrived at site 2:07 a.m. Observed lights flickering in the upper story, though no house remains above foundation. Heard footsteps circling columns. The ground shook as if many people were moving in time, no individuals visible. At 2:13 a.m., a distinct cry of an infant was heard from the direction of the cellar. Lights extinguished at 2:15 a.m. Left site immediately. The report was filed, sealed, and buried in county archives. But its existence was confirmed during a historical review in 1978. In 1961, a man named Caleb Price gave a recorded interview to a university folklore team. He was in his 80s, a lifelong resident of Albemarle. I saw him. Not once, not twice, 3 times. First in 1919, when I was a boy. A stranger came to the store, burn scars down his neck. Asked for a match, though he carried one already. Smiled with teeth that weren't teeth. Coins, I swear. Dropped one in my hand. When I looked, it was gone, but my palm burned for a week. The second time was after the war. He hadn't aged. Not a day. Same eyes, same smile. He asked me if I wanted more than I deserved. I said no. I still dream he's waiting for me to say yes. Third time, well, I won't talk about that. But I'll tell you this. The Sinclairs ain't gone. They're waiting for doors, and sometimes the doors walk right into them. The recording ends with static. Caleb Price was found dead in his home 2 months later. A pile of ash in his fireplace, though no fire had been lit. What unsettles me most, reviewing all these accounts, is not what happened in 1817. It's what still happens. The name Sinclair is rarely spoken now, yet the land is avoided like a plague. Locals pretend the columns fell long ago, though photographs prove otherwise. And sometimes, when the wind is right, people claim to hear chanting carried across the fields. Words no one recognizes. A mouth moving without language. I've seen it myself. A flicker in the ruins, a shadow leaning against the last column, patient as a creditor. The legacy of those who survived, neighbors, witnesses, descendants, reads like a list of tragedies. Families reporting madness. Sudden fortune followed by ruin. Children vanishing without explanation. Men returning from war claiming they dreamed of the Sinclair house, though they'd never set foot in Virginia. It's as if the covenant did not end with the Sinclairs at all. As if its hunger spread, thread by thread, into anyone who brushed too close. And the journals, the fragments of Eleanor's diary, the black leather tome, surface in whispers. Collectors claim to own pages that bleed when cut. Libraries insist they've never cataloged such works, yet shelves seem to make space for them. The story refuses to stay buried. The same way ash refuses to stop smelling of fire. So here we are, more than 2 centuries later. The house is gone, but the columns remain. The fields are quiet, but not empty. And the covenant, the debt, the hunger, waits still. The Sinclairs bought wealth with blood, and the debt was never theirs alone. Every door that opens on their story risks becoming another mouth for the covenant. Even now you are listening, hearing these words. You are holding the diary Eleanor once wrote. You are reading the black journal Charles once hid. You are speaking the names they wanted you to speak, and the covenant remembers. Police logs close with a warning scribbled in the margin of a 1920s report. The officer never signed his name. What if it happens again? And the answer is not if, it's when. Because the Sinclair covenant is not finished. It is simply waiting for the next door to open. The end.